What if we treated our health a little bit more like we treated our iPhones or our computers or our cars? For example, just a week ago, I was having a problem with my computer and it was frustrating. So I immediately Googled it. I learned some information. I learned that it might be an issue with overheating. I went to the store. I bought something that I could use to clean out my computer and clean out my fans. I opened up the back of my laptop. I watched a YouTube video on how to do it. I cleaned it. I put it back together. It's working better now. And I have a more functioning, healthy computer. Meanwhile, when it comes to my health, I've had a knee issue. I started a running journey about 6 months ago, and I've been having this pain on the outside of my right knee that's limited my ability to run. In fact, it's completely halted it because I couldn't run without being in pain. And my approach to that injury and that problem, a health-related issue, has been completely different. I've essentially ignored it, hoped it would go away, done little to no research about it, made little to no effort to try to consult a professional or get some other opinion and try to make this thing better and make myself healthier. This idea of prioritizing the health of our gadgets and our vehicles and the different technology in our lives over our own health is an idea that my guest, Safia Fitzpatrick, brought to our show today. Safia has been on a very difficult and long health journey of her own that actually started back with her mother and her mother's passing that launched her into exploring and learning about and going through some of her own health struggles and journey. And frankly, I don't want to try to tell her story for her because I won't be able to do it justice as she will. But there were a few things that stood out to me about our conversation and about Safia's story. One of those things was this idea about kind of knowledge is power, and that if you don't know about something, then educate yourself about it. Typically, when we don't know about something, it creates this sense of fear. What could happen? What could be? And it's just because we don't know. It was a great reminder for me that knowledge can be power. If you seek to understand a health issue or another person and their experience in life, you might gain something from that. It might make you feel a little bit less afraid and more empowered to do something about it. As I was sharing some of my health issues or some of my fear of working with doctors or professionals through this conversation, Safia had some great insights into the mindset that she takes to working with health professionals. The questions that she asks, the ways in which she's not afraid to follow up or challenge. I just thought it was really helpful because entering into conversations with health professionals feels foreign to me. It feels intimidating. It feels scary. So I don't do it. And I don't think that's great for my health. Safia had this way of breaking things down and making it simple, actionable, and feel a lot less scary. Intertwined with so much of Safia's journey that has been, and our conversation was, very health-oriented, there's all kinds of nuggets and perspectives that I think you're going to enjoy hearing. One of them was her talking about her current work as a substitute teacher and how she is learning from elementary school kids. They are teaching her. I love this mindset shift and this perspective that young people and young kids have so much that we could learn from if we pay attention and if we're willing to learn. Lastly, the most powerful idea that's really stuck with me is just this idea of taking agency over our own bodies, over our own health. And I guess I just apply that greater to taking agency over our lives. Assuming a role of autonomy in gathering information and knowledge and being able to make informed decisions on our health, on our bodies, and our lives for ourselves and for the people closest to us. This was a thoughtful and informative and thought-provoking conversation with Safia Fitzpatrick. So without further ado, here it is. You said I'm an open book. Mm-hmm. Have you always been that way? Have you always been willing to share?
Oh, no. No, I was not raised in a culture where sharing was promoted or supported. And I think a lot of people will find that to be true, especially for our parents' generations where you did not discuss certain topics. They were taboo. So.
What were some of those topics?
Well, my biggest one now is women's health. I am a huge advocate and proponent for women's health. Women's health is not taboo. I really like speaking a lot about social justice issues. I like crossing boundaries and advocating for not just women's health as well, but genetic health and understanding your genetic history, the importance behind it. And I truly try. I mean, we all have a blind spot, but I truly try to live by the words that, ignorance is not an excuse. If you don't understand something, you don't know about it, that's okay. Admittance to that does not make you weak. And so educating yourself, I find myself to be a voracious reader and a continuous student of the world, so in my environment. And so having grown up in an environment where I felt that speaking on such topics wasn't supported, you just get older and you get tired. You just get tired. And you find that there is a lot more support. And I truly believe there's a lot more humans that are kind and empathetic than there are for evil. So bridging the gap is really just about bringing the walls down and talking. So that's what I like to do.
Tired of what? So you had this upbringing where there were certain topics that you weren't going to talk about, that weren't accepted to be talked about. Then you go through life, you get older, and you get tired. What are you tired of that makes you start to change the way that you view, you know what, I'm going to start embracing some of these topics?
Yeah. Stigmas, shame, feeling like you should live within barriers, fear. Gosh, is that a big one? Uncovering people and understanding that people live in fear. It's just not necessary. We really live in fear of the unknown rather than just learning and understanding, and then processing and creating informative responses, right? And especially in our socio-political environment these days, we are all so quick to react rather than to learn. And so I really try to embody that. I'm a substitute teacher for my son's school. I would do that full time. I go in every day and I never know where I am. And I love that challenge because I get to impact so many students, but I don't know what each of those students have been through, right? Each day, everybody comes in with a different perspective in life. And so I love being able to speak and learn and understand. And they really help me learn how to ask questions, how to ask the right questions, so that I am educating myself and understanding more, not just about what they're going through, but how it helps them to develop into humans. Because that's the one thing I don't want, is for them to grow older and to feel stigmatized or shamed or guilt for any of the concerns they may have.
What age of students are we talking about here?
I primarily stick with fourth graders all the way down to what we call pre-kindergarten, which is 3 and 4. So think 3 and 4 all the way to about 10.
So you've got fourth graders down to pre-K kids, and you're saying they are teaching you. That's interesting.
1,000%.
I don't feel like that would be the typical, like, okay, you're the substitute teacher. You're going in to teach them, which I'm sure is happening to some extent, but they're teaching you. So tell me more about that. How are they teaching you?
Oh, gosh. Kids will teach you, one, to listen. I don't think adults listen. Adults, we listen to react. We don't listen to learn and then to respond. And we oftentimes really take kids for granted, right? They are a wealth of knowledge and they're viewing things from fresh eyes. So if you can hear them, truly listen and hear them, they will teach you what it is that they are seeing from their eyes. They don't have necessarily the words to fully express it, but if you truly stop and listen, they will. And I think the other factor is they are so, I'm encouraged by our future leaders because they are such provocative thinkers. We think that kids, they're so simple-minded. Yes, they are to a certain extent, but we also complicate things. And they tend to they're like, well, why not just do it this way? This is easy. Let's just do it this way. And you're like, yeah, why not? You're right. Why? Adults tend to make things sticky and gooey, and kids are like, nope, this is just what we should do. We should have it this way. And that's honestly how they teach you how to communicate, because you come direct. We're going to talk about this. This is what we're going to do. Here's how you do it. And they also teach you specific terminology to use, because if you utilize wrong terminology, you'll be laughed at pretty quickly.
It's interesting, do you think that comes from, is it because as we get older and we go through life and we go through experiences, we just get sort of bogged down by the different perspectives that exist or different societal views that exist, or it's just easy to fall in line with like, well, the thinking of it's always been this way. We've always done it this way. So we just sort of assume we'll continue doing that. Whereas maybe kids are like, they just don't have that experience. So they're not viewing things as the way we've always done it. They're just like, oh, that doesn't really make sense. Or why don't we just do it this way? Is it experience that bogs down adults?
I think so.
What's our problem?
What's our problem? I know. I do. I think there's a lot of societal conditioning, and cultural conditioning. And, first and foremost, kids just want love. That's all they're seeking. And they don't know how to attract it. So we think that we have kids that are bad kids, or we have, but kids just want love. They want your love and attention. And they don't know how to verbalize that. And truly, we have to teach them how to say that. That's one of the things that I have with my child is, listen, you're allowed to have feelings. You're allowed to have emotions. You're not allowed to be disrespectful. And if you really need attention, don't act out. Just come and tell me, Mama, I don't feel like I'm getting enough attention. I need you to come and watch me. I would rather you do that than go hit little Billy to get that negative attention, right? And I think, experience for adults is what we end up falling and getting conditioned into these societal norms, which goes into what I was speaking about with women's health, that, we don't want to talk about, periods or menopause or, other genetic mutations in health and that kind of stuff that, we should be discussing. And if you ever hear a kid ask a question and you're like, oh, that took me by surprise, they don't know. They don't really have a filter because they don't know. They're just genuinely curious. And I never, ever, ever shame any of my kids for that. If they come and ask me, they call me Mrs. Fizzy. Mrs. Fizzy.
I love that.
The little ones who can't say Fitzpatrick. How old are you? And I always blow their mind by telling them I'm older than the internet.
That's a good fact. I had, Eileen and I were in Colorado, and we were in like a hot springs, and we ended up playing basketball with these two young kids. They were 9 and 12. And the 12-year-old asked how old I am. And I was like, how old do you think I am? And he's like, I don't know, maybe 15. And I'm like, it's just, you gotta love the innocence of kids. I'm like, you're 12. You think I'm 3 years older than you? It's great. My mom also works in the schools, and she'll have the same kind of thing with her kids, and she'll get answers anywhere from 11 to 90, and my mom's 59. So it's
bless her.
Just
That's
hilarious.
Awesome.
Bless their hearts, the kids.
They're great.
The idea that kids just want to be loved. Well, isn't that also true for adults? Like, does it really change at any point in our lives that we want to be loved? I mean, what makes up in your mind? What makes up being loved?
I think everybody has their ways of being loved, right? Some people love hugs. They love the physical touch. Some people want personal one-on-one attention. Some people want to be just heard. Some people want to be left alone. And, we talk about like acts of service. And I really think it's different for each person and what their compatibility is. And that's why I think teachers have a superpower, because I promise you, teachers know everything about every kid. They know what sports they're in. They know, what subjects they're having difficulty in. They know who their friends are. They know who their parents are. They know what kind of cars you all are pulling up in. So don't try any shenanigans, because we know that. I mean, they know the schedules, who's on the bus, they just absorb all of that. And so I think that you're right. Adults do request it and they need it also, but it varies in the language. And as we get to grow up, we have responsibility, and then we want to start our own families. And, we have not to say that I don't have them either. I try to confront them, but we all grow up with biases, right? So we're starting to navigate and learn and understand how to, manage our biases as well. So, again, as we get older, I think we just make things a little more sticky, and it's hard. Like, when was the last time an adult went up to somebody and was like, I need your attention, please. I just want you to pay attention to me. No.
And doesn't it feel like it would just be so much more simple if we could communicate in that way? If we could just go up to someone and say exactly what we're thinking or feeling.
Yeah.
But somewhere along the way, we are taught that, oh, no, you don't say that, or you don't ask that. Or, I mean, it would be so much more simple if that's the way that we communicated with one another.
Yep. Absolutely. I totally agree. I do.
I know what's probably happening right now. You just heard the ad music play. You're starting to tune out exactly what I'm saying, so you can skip this ad and get back to the conversation, and I'm going to encourage you not to. Because if you continue to skip this ad in order to get back to the conversation, then at some point there may not be a conversation for you to get back to. Okay, now that I have your attention, that might have been a little bit exaggerated. Likely, I'm not going to stop producing this show, but you can help me make this show a lot more viable, and so I can continue doing this into the future. Fun fact, I don't make any money from this show. In fact, I actually pay in order to create these episodes on a weekly basis. And while that may not exactly seem like your problem or your issue, if you like meaningful conversations like the ones that we have here, well, then it is your problem. I could use your help in the form of financial support specifically in order to keep this show going and continually invest back into creating it. Here's another fun fact. If everyone listening to this episode were to donate the single cost of a cup of coffee, I could probably do this as a full-time job. That is a dream and a vision I have for myself one day, and I want this to be like PBS or NPR, where it's funded by the viewers. I'm imagining a show where we, together, collectively, decide that these meaningful conversations are important to us, and we don't rely on outside help or advertisers in order to keep them coming on a weekly basis. So yes, this is a long-winded way of saying I'm asking you for money. If you're in a place where you feel comfortable doing so, I am asking you to make a small donation to support the show. You can do that by following the link that is in the show notes of this episode to a place called Buy Me a Coffee. Now, by buying me a coffee through this platform, you're not actually buying me a coffee. It's just kind of a mental construct to make this transaction of money a little bit more tangible. Thank you in advance for considering supporting me, supporting the show, and for supporting meaningful conversations like the one we're about to get back to right now. Women's health, why is that one of the topics that you in particular like speaking on? And why do you feel like it's such a taboo thing?
Yeah. I'm going to give you my personal experience and speak from me and what I've been through on my journey. So, my mother was diagnosed with breast cancer when I was about 18. She battled that. It went into remission. Soon after that, she actually had a brain aneurysm, had surgery on that. Then that went into remission and was fine, recovered, I should say. Then soon after that, she was diagnosed with ovarian cancer. The ovarian cancer is what eventually took her life at a young 54 years. And I was 26 years old. I was 11 days before my 27th birthday. And she was not only diagnosed with ovarian cancer, but while she was fighting it and getting treatment, she was also diagnosed with the BRCA1 gene or the BRCA1 gene. There's two BRCA genes, BRCA1 and BRCA2, which stands for breast cancer. And one of the things they were doing earlier on was really looking and researching to find the genetic code behind it and how far back this gene would go. And my family originates from Yemen. I was born in Kenya. My mother was born in Yemen. My father was born in Kenya as well as my brother. But my mom was actually raised primarily in Egypt. And so we have kind of family scattered all over the Middle East and now even further on, scattered all over the world. And trying to go back down our family lineage, we struggled to figure out who had what diseases and who had cancers and why. She was told stories about, oh, this auntie died of, and it's kind of like the old wives' tale, rocks in her breasts. But nobody, you didn't discuss that. You didn't discuss that. It wasn't talked about. It wasn't, So as I got married, I married my husband, Jimmy, and we actually moved to Europe. We were living in Belgium for a couple years and got to go and get genetic testing. And I was tested positive as well. And with being BRCA1 positive, my mom being, I should say, the offspring have a 50-50 chance of having that mutated gene. Mine was unfortunately positive. So from there, I was on this roller coaster every 6 months to constantly get tested with what they call preventative care, which is a little misleading. I would go in for breast mammograms. I would go in for ultrasounds, intravaginal ultrasounds, all kinds, blood tests. Every 6 months, I was on this roller coaster until they, you're ready to have a kid. And when we decided we were going to start our family, I was still on testing, but there's certain, obviously, tests that can't do while you're pregnant. My husband and I had agreed that when I turned 40, whether we had one kid, whether we had 3 kids, that was going to be the cutoff for my preventative care. And I'll get into that in a second. So why I think that's misleading to say that the testing is preventative is because it's not really preventing anything. It's preventing later stage diagnosis. 1 in 8 women is going to have breast cancer and they're going to be diagnosed. However, if it is diagnosed, it's such a preventable disease these days. They can catch it in what's essentially even stage 0 is what they call it. And so for women who do carry the BRCA gene, mine specifically in my history, my risk would inherently go up exponentially at age 40. And so I decided at that moment, my husband and I had agreed that when I turned 40, I would go through my preventative surgeries, which was a full bilateral mastectomy, reconstructive surgery, and a full hysterectomy, meaning I don't even have my ovaries, and thrust into menopause at the young age of 40. And so knowing that breast cancer is such a curable and really is a preventable disease is why I speak about it. And I think we've come a long way in talking about it. I mean, you see tons of fundraisers and outreach programs and all kinds of support around pink and women and men even. And they've even broken a lot of the barriers with the verbiage, right? Save the tatas, love these boobies. Like we've gotten more comfortable. You couldn't imagine that back in the 90s wearing a shirt that said save the tatas, right? But my bigger goal now is also to talk about ovarian cancer and the risks around ovarian cancer and what happens and the diagnosis around it. And it's a silent killer. A lot of the symptoms that come around ovarian cancer are not familiar. People are not familiar with until it is too late and it is diagnosed with an ultrasound or an MRI or a PET scan or what have you. So if we can do that and push the envelope with boobs, we can do that and push the envelope with uteruses, ovaries, cervical cancer. I make sure that I always use the proper verbiage because the more we use it, the more people will be familiar and it becomes less stigmatized.
I want to walk back to some of these moments in your story.
Yes.
Losing your mom. Unfortunately, we share in losing a parent. I lost my dad at the age of 50. He died of a heart attack. I was 17, and
sorry.
it's a very pivotal moment in your life.
Yeah.
What impact did losing your mother have on you, on some of the ways, on your perspectives or the outlooks that you have on life?
Oh, it matured me very quickly. Definitely matured me. It motivated me in the sense that there was nothing else I think in the world that I was going to go through that was going to be that difficult. Right? Like at what point was I ever going to look at anything in life and go, oh my gosh, this was harder than losing my mom and watching her die. I mean, truly, when you see someone so vibrant and so full of life, she was working until I think the last couple of weeks before she was really started to decline. And it really taught me that my time, me personally, is valuable. So I realize, at 54, that's such a short time. 54 years I'm 42 now. I'm like, it's kind of scary to think. We don't ever feel like we're getting older. And at this age is when she got her first diagnosis. So it matures you. And it really, for me, it really made me switch and look at my lens differently and say, I'm so grateful that I have the capacity for healthcare. I'm so grateful that I have the capacity and the wherewithal to know I need to go doctors. I'm so grateful. I have so many women that constantly, because I'm very, very public about my journey on my social media, even though my social media is private, anybody who wants to ask me, I'm very public about it and talk with them about my story, because I know that my mom would have appreciated that. She would have appreciated someone to be able to talk her through about what was going on. I know she would have appreciated being able to just share her emotions. And so for me, this is the strength that I watched. When I watched my mom go through all her treatments, all her multiple surgeries, and then through her passing, I just vowed to myself I was not going to let her passing go in vain. And so anytime I got an opportunity to talk about it on panels, on podcasts, on the news, articles, anything I could get my hands on, I was going to share. Because someone out there is going to be, especially with women of color, Arab, Muslim women, where it is a hard topic to talk about within the culture. I want people to know that you are not alone. You can do this. We can talk about this. And there's no shame associated with it. You didn't do anything wrong. This just is, and we need to help you.
Is that the shame that is often that leads to people not wanting to speak about it or share or seek help? Is some kind of feeling like they've done something wrong, or what causes people to not share, to not seek help?
I think it's a few different things. I think it's, like I said, one, it's a social conditioning, right? Like we've been taught that as women, especially, we're not to be a burden. We're supposed to be strong. And especially as women of color, the matriarch of homes, how could we show that we're weak if we have a disease, right? How can we ask for help? Women are constantly judged at work on the basis of whether or not they have children. And if they have children, on the basis of whether or not they have work, right? So with this kind of coming from both ends, it's almost better to stay quiet and bear the burden on yourself than to relay and speak about it. But again, if you don't, then you're just feeding into the monster of staying quiet. So I think that that's one. I think two, that there is some level of shame. I think that's starting to lift, but it's still, there is a looming cloud, especially when it comes to more of the female reproductive cancers, cervical, ovarian, speaking about, sexual libido, going into menopause, what's happening there, hot flashes, all of these conversations are very difficult to tackle. I mean, my parents never even spoke to me about sex. I learned all about sex in school and then had to do my own research growing up, right? So as you get older and you start to learn more and more and having a healthy relationship with sex and your husband, right? It shouldn't be shameful. And so I think it's all of those kind of arrows or points, like fingers that aren't really there, but again, have been conditioned upon us to believe that they are there, that make us feel and stay quiet.
Yeah. Well, I continue to find that sometimes it just takes one person, one example of someone being willing to share. And then it's kind of like, oh, okay. It makes it more acceptable for other people. That's a lot of the thesis behind this show is, I'm one person. If I can sit down with someone and I can have a thoughtful conversation, if I can hopefully be a good listener, if I can be curious, if I can ask questions, my intention is that creates some form of an example of like, hey, this is possible. We can have conversation where we sit down and we genuinely seek to understand one another. We ask questions. We learn about things that might not necessarily directly affect our lives in this moment, but doesn't mean that they aren't important. I thought it was really interesting that you said in the beginning that ignorance is not an excuse. Mm-hmm. And I would say I've used ignorance as an excuse for much of my life, where it's just kind of like, well, if I just don't get too close to something, and if I don't learn just enough, then I can claim I just didn't know. And that's, that's a pass for me. Mm-hmm. So I guess I'm just thinking out loud about, I think, these conversations are a way of trying to gain perspective and gain understanding of different things that are out there.
We love it. We love it. And it's okay. I mean, we're all guilty of it, right? Because our society, it's not always rewarding to learn. It's not always rewarding to learn and to understand the truth.
What do you mean by that?
We want to learn. Okay. Gosh, you're going to get me off on this whole tangent. Here we go.
Let's do it.
We teach our kids, we teach them education is important, and we want to promote and encourage them to learn. But if you look at a lot of the systems that are in place, we almost like guide them on what they should be learning, right? Like, for example, I would have really, really benefited in high school learning financial literacy. But instead, I learned all about sine, cosine, and tangent, right? And so now here, 20 years post-college, and I've never used sine, cosine, and tangent, but I have to do my taxes. And I don't know, so that's what I mean. It's not always rewarded to learn. We put parameters in space to hold space for value, for completion versus for true knowledge literacy. If that makes sense.
Yeah, true knowledge literacy. What does that look like? How do we gain that? From your experience, if you weren't gaining that from school, mm-hmm. where were you learning about some of these things?
I get asked that so much. I get asked all the time, like, how did you learn this? Or what made you want to do this? Or the truth is I don't know. I don't know. I wish I had an answer. I do know that there was a very pivotal moment where I was sick and tired of being afraid. I was sick and tired of constantly not doing or feeling like I wasn't doing enough because I was afraid. I'm like, well, what am I afraid of? So traveling is a huge one for me. I love to travel, but when I travel, I'm traveling to immerse in the culture. I'm traveling to meet people there. I'm traveling to understand, what is it that you all eat? What is it that you do? What is it for fun? Why are you celebrating this? Why is it a big deal here? I try to ask those kind of out of the box questions. So travel is definitely one. Reading. I don't care what you read. That's one of the things I push. I don't care what you read. Just read. Because if you do, I guarantee you're going to learn something. You can read murder mysteries. You can read smut. You can read, self-help. Doesn't matter. Just read. Get yourself out there and just read. And Audible counts. You're busy and you're in the car. Put that on. But I think people get to a point if they can really see, let me back up. My mom used to tell me, because I grew up in a predominantly Jewish neighborhood, I may be the only Quran that someone may ever read. I may be the only Arab or Arab that someone may ever come across and learn from. We see that across cultures. I see it in Black culture oftentimes in America. It's like, act like a king, act like a queen. I tell my son that all the time. Is your behavior excellent today? Did you act as a king? To hold to a certain standard and make sure that, accepting, inclusive. So I think what it ultimately comes down to is, do you want to learn? Are you self-aware enough? Do you want to explore more? Ask questions and be ready to be provocative with your questions, right? Be ready to hear things you don't want to hear. It's really comes to I think self-awareness and self-seeking.
Seems basic, and yet I don't feel like we see enough examples of that in our day-to-day society.
Yeah.
You mentioned, this pivotal moment, and you talked about fear.
Mm-hmm.
And then you went into explaining some of the ways that you go about, gaining different knowledge and perspective. What was the fear in that moment when you realized that there was something that you were afraid of? What was that fear? What were you afraid of?
Gosh, so there's a lot of things. Something as simple as like, yeah, for example, am I going to be able to have kids? Something as simple as if I travel, am I going to be trafficked? Right? And no, those aren't simple. Let me change my terminology. Those are just the less complex, right? Straight, kind of more straightforward. The more complex ones were fear of, well, what's going to happen to me after I have these surgeries? Am I going to qualify for these surgeries? Am I going to get diagnosed before these surgeries? Am I going to do enough? Am I going to impact enough? There was a lot of fear around those things. Do I want a kid and pass this on to my child? There was a time where my husband and I actually considered IVF to see if we could genetically manipulate our child, which is controversial. Everybody has their own opinion. But if we could genetically manipulate the my egg, to see if we could turn off the BRCA1 gene. And then that way it would be stopped at our generation. It wouldn't able to turn it off or on. And it would have at that time cost a fortune to try to have that tested to see if it did have the gene. And I don't know all the details around it, but when we realized how invasive IVF really is and how difficult it is, knowing that I still had to go through my preventative care every 6 months, knowing that I would also have to go through all of these surgeries, we just said, you know what? That's a lot to ask of my body. That's a lot. So let's try it natural. And what happens, God's will, and we'll keep moving. And we had my beautiful baby boy, Gabriel.
I want to go back to some of these questions. Those are some big questions. What's going to happen to me if I have these surgeries? Will I be diagnosed? Will my time that I have here matter? Will my impact be enough? Those are some really big questions.
I know. I didn't know I was that introspective and that serious, I guess, at 26.
But I mean, that's great. So where did some of that questioning lead you to? I mean, what's your relationship with some of those questions now? Did you find answers? Did you view the questions differently? What journey did the questioning take you on?
The journey that the questioning took me on was, okay, let me seek knowledge. Let me go out. Let me see what I can find. The internet is a scary fear, right? But I would ask so many questions. The number of times I got asked by a variety of oncologists, just so you have a heads up, I've lived in Michigan. I met my husband in North Carolina. We lived in Belgium. Short time we lived in Italy. We lived in a short time in just outside of Chicago, in California, in Texas, and now we're in Wisconsin. So just to kind of give you a heads up of all the places we've been. Every time I go somewhere, I'm proud to say that my oncologist always looks at me and says, you really know what you're talking about. And so I would look up, what are the latest studies? What's happening? What are they researching? What are they doing? Who's figuring what out? Where are they on those studies? I kind of keep a tally and think of a mental note. How is this progressing? What's holding up the study? Which is usually funding, of course. But that was one of the things, was I was like, it was important to me to take agency over my body, because at the moment I got diagnosed with BRCA1, I felt like, man, all these people are telling me what I need to do. And I'm going to give you the respect for being a doctor. You've earned it. Absolutely. But this is my body and I want to make the decision. And if I waited too long, then cancer was going to make the decision for me. And I saw that happen already. So I just didn't want to go down that path. So understanding and learning as much as possible about it without becoming an oncologist myself was just crucial for me. So I always go in and I make sure I ask questions. And currently, actually now, so you asked me, how did that change my questions? My questions just pivoted from my perspective and where I am at in life. Obviously, I know I had one child. He's wonderful. We're super happy. For all those people who want multiples and are a little scared, aren't sure, there are so many blessings to having one kid. He's super easy to pack up and travel with. But for instance, now I'm literally was on a call with my oncologist's office trying to get on testosterone. So for those who don't know, your ovaries produce estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone. Once I was pushed into menopause, they put me on an estrogen patch, which is common. Because I also had the bilateral mastectomy, it's technically considered risk reducing because they don't know for sure that they removed all of the breast tissue cells, but it's a good amount, right? It reduces my risk significantly. And same with my reproductive organs. So I've gone 2 years now on just estrogen, and I'm finding things changing about my body. I'm exhausted. You get older, you're gaining weight. My body is shifting. My libido is changing. And so here I go. Get back on that internet, start looking and seeing who's talking about what, and trying to cross-reference, finding menopausal experts. And something that I found is menopause is so under-researched. It's crazy. It is so crazy. And so finding a few experts and seeing what they're finding and what studies they're doing, and not just in the US, but all over the globe. And now I'm having conversations with my oncologist stating, hey, I want testosterone. I have gone 40 years creating this hormone, and now you're telling me I can't have it? I've gone 2 years. It was okay. I hung in there, but it's not working for me anymore. We got to do something. And so now they're kind of going on this back and forth, like, should we, shouldn't we? Should we? Progesterone is out of the question, which is fine. That helps with the lining of the uterus since I don't have a uterus. And also it helps with women who are breastfeeding. That's not me. So I'm A-okay. Now, do I think that there is a, chemical significance in the rest of my organs and body? I'm sure it is. It was used to using progesterone in its own way. Do we know more about that? I personally don't, if there's studies out there, but it's not significant enough for me to want to go on it because my risk for cancers would increase exponentially. And I found that kind of across the board with progesterone. But testosterone is the one that I'm still learning about and don't know enough about it and don't know why some women are prescribed and some women aren't, and at what dosage, and of the various mutations, who is supported and not receiving it. And so that's actually where I'm at right now.
How do you go about finding the balance between, I think it was in that Essence article that had come out at the end of last year. And in there you were quoted, it'll be my life's ministry to inspire women to break societal conditioning and trust themselves, that particularly at the end, and trust themselves. How do you find a balance between seeking knowledge, seeking information based on studies, based on research that has been done, based on conversations that are being had, and trusting yourself and trusting some of your own experience? How do you find the balance between the two?
Oftentimes, I think the balance is created for me. And I don't know if balance is the correct word, but maybe parameters, right? Because technically I could illegally go out, get some testosterone and shoot myself up if I really wanted to. But I also, again, I don't know enough about it. There's a level of trust I have to put into these professionals, scientists, researchers, and doctors. And so when I say tell women to trust themselves, it's really about listening to your body. My mom knew something was wrong months before, and was misdiagnosed. And we used to see that all the time, especially with breast cancer, Women would feel something, they weren't sure. Now it is a lot more, it's normalized to talk about self-breast exams. It's normalized to, I mean, I can't tell, I've had multiple friends who have said, I was being intimate with my partner. He happened to feel something and I set up an appointment. So that is becoming more normalized, but they are listening to their bodies and going and saying, hey, there is something not right. And whether it comes out to be something or not. But I think the balance really comes from asking right questions, finding out, what one of the questions I always ask when I go in to see physicians is, tell me something that I should know. What questions am I not asking that I should know? That's almost fear-like for them. And oftentimes they might come back and say, I don't have anything. I'm like, no, there's got to be something in here. Speak to me, even though I know that I know as much as I know, and I've been on this journey for, however long. What should I know now? If you're up with your studies, if you're learning and you're understanding research and you're going to conferences and you're learning new stuff, what should I know? What's coming out? What's new? I actually asked my OB-GYN oncologist prior to my hysterectomy that. And she came out and said, actually, they're coming out with new studies that are finding that women's ovarian cancer might be starting in the fallopian tubes and not necessarily in the actual ovaries. And that I thought was very interesting. And so that research is still progressing.
That's a great question. I mean,
thanks.
I'm speaking on behalf of myself and probably other people listening, where I'm intimidated by our medical system. I don't understand a lot of things about how the system works. I don't understand a lot of things about my own physical body. Very small example, but just using it because it's a real example. I started running 5 or 6 months ago, was really enjoying the experience, especially just kind of like some of the internal benefit, a lot of the mental benefit. I started dealing with a knee injury. And I'm again, very different, but I'm using it as an example of I'm having this problem. I'm having this injury. I'm trying to do some of my own research. I'm not really getting anywhere. I'm having people be like, well, how come you don't go to like a doctor and have them, have them look at it? And there's a fear. There's a fear of, I don't know. I don't know what questions to ask. I don't know. I just don't feel like I know enough. And then it's going back to that kind of ignorance where it almost feels, it creates a sense of shame. Like, oh, maybe I should know more. I should know the questions to ask. I should know how the system works, but I don't. So I stay away from it. And that's not a great solution either. No. I can at least recognize that. So what's your message to someone like me or someone else listening who is like, okay, maybe I'm hearing you and like, yeah, I'm noticing something changing in my body. I'm noticing something wrong, but we're frozen.
Yeah.
What's your message to me, us?
So my message to you, us, they, all of us, is one, I'm not sure where we got frozen in the fact that we assume that we should know things about all things. We're not expected. They're professionals for a reason. And I fully, adhere to and agree to that, right? They like I said, whatever doctor, orthopedist specializing, they clearly went through enough schooling and training. But go in it with a mindset of, let me just ask questions and have a conversation. And always know you can always get multiple opinions, and your choice is your choice. You don't have to go, if you go into a doctor and say, my back is hurting me, and they scope it out and they look and they're like, oh, well, you're going to need, a neurologist and have neurosurgery. If you don't want to do it, that's still your choice. And I think that that's really what it comes down to, is the agency that you take over your body to make the decision for yourself. Well, right now, if I'm going to be honest, Chad, you're allowing your knee to dictate what's happening to you, as opposed to you and your fear, right? Just go in, ask questions. And I think the other factor is, oftentimes we have like this analysis paralysis. We go into doctors' offices and we don't know what to say, or we think of questions later. They're working for us. So email, call. Hey, I need a few minutes. I came up with a few more questions. And this is what I want to know and I want to understand. No decision has to be final and on the moment. We think society, we have to do it right now, right now, right now. We don't have to figure all that out right now. We just want you to get the knowledge, seek the knowledge, ask the questions, go home, as I like to say, marinate on it, and then, make an educated decision and understanding. The other factor I would say is you've heard of 5 degrees of separation, right? Or 6 degrees of separation, whichever one you believe in. Somebody knows somebody. So ask around. Again, why conversation shouldn't be taboo. Did you go through a hysterectomy? Did you go through, knee surgery? Did you have these issues? What were your problems? Oh, I know so-and-so. Everybody, I call it, everybody has a mayor, somebody that knows everybody, right? We all have a mayor in our group of friends. Go find your mayor, ask around, see what they have to say, and just, it's conversation. It doesn't have to be decision-based. It's just garnering knowledge.
I love your point about by not doing anything, by living out of fear, I am giving up. I'm losing my agency. It's not up to me anymore. I'm living in a state of pain and I'm letting something dictate what I do or don't do and make decisions for me. I'm no longer in control and I don't have agency anymore. I mean, I hadn't really thought about it that way, but it's a powerful point.
Thank you. Yeah. So it's almost double-sided sometimes because I want more and we don't have the knowledge or around it, but at least I've come to a point where I've tried, right? I've tried to get the answers. I've tried to seek the knowledge. I've tried to learn. Okay, if I can't do anymore, then I can't do anymore. Then the decision is made for me, but I at least know that I did it the best that I could. And that truly is the best that I could, right? So.
Yeah, I've been thinking a lot about, I guess a lot of it's around, I've been thinking about the definition of failure. That's something that comes up a lot on this show, is talking about that. And we'll talk, my guest and I, we'll talk about, back in therapy a couple of years ago, my therapist asked me, I was struggling with failure, feeling like that was getting me stuck in places and feeling like, oh, I didn't want to fail. And then he was asking me, what is failure? What does it actually mean to you? Anyway, the definition that I ended up coming to was something around the idea of, to me, failure is when I don't put my maximum effort into the things that I can control, the things that I can do. If I don't do that, that's what I would consider failure. If I can control it, I can do more, I can put more energy into it, whatever that may be, and I don't, then shame on me. So I guess that just made me think of that, where we have these things that are within our control. You have taken within your control, you can gain knowledge. That's what you can do. You can seek to learn more, you can seek to understand more. And if there comes a point where there's no more that you can learn, well, then that's just it. But as you said, you've done everything that you can do. That feels important to me.
It's very important. And especially when it comes to our health, right? We prioritize so many things. We prioritize the health of our phones. We prioritize the health of our computers. We prioritize, even as parents, we prioritize our kids' health. Did you take your vitamins today? Did you take your antibiotic today? Have you checked your insulin today? We prioritize all these other factors, but when it comes to our health, somehow we all come around and think that we're like Superman, or we assume the sacrifice, so the not running, makes us powerful or a better person. But what I would love for my child, when I get older, for my child to see is, it's interesting, actually, I'll say it. I can give a perfect example. Prior to my surgeries, one of the things my breast oncologist had said to me is that I will lose feeling in both my breasts and in my chest. Some of it I may regain it, some of it may not. And of all the breast oncologists that I had seen, she was the first one to ever tell me that. And it broke me down into tears, because as a mother, the first thing they tell you when you become a mother is what you're going to do with your newborn is skin to skin. And so they always encourage that even as they get older. And what's the first thing you do? Your child gets hurt and you're like, okay, come here, baby. It's okay. Come here. And you hug them into you. And it really got me. And so I told him that. And I said, the other thing that I'm really worried about is when I recover from my hysterectomy, being able to hold you and carry you. Am I going to be able to do that? He's 7 years old now, way past carrying. But there are times that he comes running up to me and I will grab him and his arm or his legs are around my waist. And every single time he reminds me and says, aren't you glad you can do this? Aren't you so glad you could still do this? I had that vulnerable moment with him. I told him, I was like, I'm scared I'm never going to be able to carry you again. We're going to see what happens. And so now he's like, aren't you glad you can do this again, Mom? I'm like, I am, actually. And good news is, while I don't have feeling in my breasts, I do have feeling in my chest and my upper chest, like on my sternum and up above. I do not have feeling under one of my armpits. But yeah. So
even to be able to express fear like that takes a lot.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Again, I'm sure my family, if they listen to this podcast, are not going to be thrilled that I'm on here talking about boobies, but not my immediate family, my cultural family out. Because again, that's the taboo behind it, is you're talking about your personal stuff, your privacy areas. You keep that hush hush. So, but I'm off that train. I'm out. I'm vocal.
Well, again, it's important. It takes someone setting that example. I'm curious about this. As you look at this chapter in your life now, you've shared some of the different stories and experiences that have led you to this point. As you think about this chapter, if this chapter of your life had a title, what would that title be?
Oh, what a great question. Humble perseverance. And the reason why is, as we get older, we know our bodies change. I have to accept a lot of that change. But the perseverance has to come with slowing down that change, as much of the change as possible, slowing it down and knowing the balance between, is it my ego? I don't have my 20-year-old body. Is it my expectations? Am I healthy? Where am I at? Am I being critical of myself? Am I pushing myself enough? Did I go to the gym enough? Did I ask enough questions? Did I go to the right people to learn? So humble perseverance, I think, is what this chapter would be called.
I've got to imagine it goes back to the idea of agency, where as things are changing, as your body is changing, and if you don't feel like you have control over that, figuring out what relationship do you have with that change and accepting it or doing something about it, or wherever it may be. But is it kind of back to that idea of agency again?
Yes. It's back to the idea of agency and self-inflicted shame, right? There's a societal norm around women and what they should be looking. Women are not allowed to age. We are not allowed to age. We aren't allowed to look a day older. We're not allowed to gain weight. We're not allowed to, all of these things. And so accept that version of acceptance really is just, it's difficult. And I think that humble perseverance really is forcing me into what would be my next chapter of maybe humble acceptance, right? If I get to a stage where I feel like I've done my due diligence, I guess once I get my testosterone, right? But we'll see what that next phase looks like. But yeah, it's about agency. It's about owning and loving yourself and respecting your own body enough to do right for it. If you would tell a friend, what advice would you tell a friend, your best friend? Tell it to yourself and follow through. Hold yourself accountable as well.
Yeah. Is there a reason why the humble acceptance chapter is the next chapter, but not part of the current chapter?
Oh, yes. Because I feel like the humble acceptance, once I get more answers, I still feel like I'm still early on in my post-menopause journey. But that's why I say it's kind of loose, because what if the things are always changing, right? Science is always changing. And so for right now, that's kind of what it feels like. The humble acceptance right now, it just doesn't feel like that, because there's still so many changes to my body. Coming out of my surgeries, I struggled a lot with my mental health. I needed to do something about it and really got on top of that. And then I was really struggling with a lot of physical pain. I was in a ton of physical therapy, chiropractics, just a ton of that. I really took about a year to develop myself physically and emotionally. And then after that, I was able to really come back into my professional career, do things. I was working for corporate last year and transitioned into, I was teaching there adults, and now I'm teaching kids, and I love both, but prefer kids. And the acceptance will come with a little bit more. There's a little more grit left in me before I kind of just go, okay, I've got all the no's. Now I understand the whys. All right, if this is it, then this is it. Then I get it. But until then, we're persevering.
I love it. Well, thank you for being willing to share this current chapter. Thank you for being willing to share the many chapters that you have been on in your life's journey. I as I said during the conversation, I find it meaningful. I think there's something that, whether I'm sharing the exact same experiences that you are or not, there's something that I can take to the person listening to this conversation. There's something that you can take away from a conversation like this. And whether it applies to your own life directly, or it applies to someone's life around you, or just gives you the perspective to be able to look at and appreciate people differently, I think that's why I value this. So thank you for being willing to share your story and your perspectives. If people wanted to find you or get in touch with you in some way, what is the best way for them to be able to do that?
Oh, thanks for asking. Yeah, I'd say the best way to get in contact with me would be my email. I'll open up my email to people, Safia Fitzpatrick at gmail.com. It's Safia, the only Safia Fitzpatrick out there. And I want to say thank you so much. One of one. And if there is another one out there, say hi. I'd love to meet you. But I really want to take a moment and say thank you so much, Chad, because credit goes to you, especially being a male. Men, you guys got to go out there, support your women. Please tell them to go, sign up for their mammograms, get their annuals, and continue to ask questions. Don't fall to ignorance on your own health, really. And if there is anything I can do, I am more than happy to help assist and guide and answer any questions that I can.
Thank you. Thank you for that reminder. And thanks for the reminders for me today, because I needed them just as much as someone who might be listening.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Boy, I got to tell you, I felt like a wake-up call in this conversation when Safia and I were talking about my knee injury, and she made the point that by not doing something, by not gathering information, by not taking some form of action, I am allowing my knee, my injury, to make decisions for me. I no longer have complete agency or autonomy in the things that I want to do. Recently, if I wanted to go out and run, well, I can't because I'm in so much pain, and I don't want to endure that level of pain. So by doing nothing, I'm letting this injury, this thing, take control of my life. For me in this moment, that happens to be this knee injury. But as I think about that idea in that concept, I think about what are the other things in my life that I might be allowing to remove my agency, remove my autonomy? What am I allowing to take over and dictate the way that I live? And in what ways am I making a conscious choice to not change that? And my friend, that would be my question to you this week, and our question of the week, which would be, what is something that you are allowing to dictate your life right now? And then I guess my follow-up question would be, and what can you do about it? That would be the next thing for me to think about, for you to think about, is if we have awareness that we're allowing something to dictate some element of our lives, well then, what are we going to change? What are we going to do about that? I'd love to hear from you if you follow the show at A Level Deeper on Instagram, or feel free to send an email to aleveldeeperpod@gmail.com. We can continue this conversation. You can answer the question of the week and interact with other listeners. If you enjoyed this conversation, if you found it helpful, thought-provoking, insightful, the best thing that you could do is share this conversation with someone in your life. Is there someone who you think would benefit from hearing Safia's story and perspectives, and sharing with them might make an impact on their life like it did yours today? Thank you, as always, for tuning in to these shows. Thank you for supporting these deeper conversations. Thank you for supporting meaningful conversations and connections like the ones that we have here. If you feel called to make a donation to support this show, you can do so using the Buy Me a Coffee link that is in the show notes. And that's all for me. So I'll see you next time.